The Parks, Vandalism, and Repesct on NP₃. Hi there, welcome to the National Parks Photography Program. And today's episode was motivated by a recent story in the news about some vandals who carved some graffiti into the sandstone in Arches National Park near one of the arches. And this sort of comes on the heels of last year a story where someone had painted on formations in various national parks and posted on social media about it. And famously, a photographer who was leading a group and started some fires at Delicate Arch with artificial logs that bled out of their trays and damaged the sandstone there. And there's a lot written about those sort of vandalism episodes, and that's obviously don't be a vandal. When you're visiting the parks, don't be a vandal. I think we can say that safely. And there's a lot written about that, so I'm not going to talk specifically about those instances because they're so obviously not the way to behave in the parks. But it does have me thinking about, what's a photographer's role in the parks? How do we behave when we're in the parks? Obviously, we're there to photograph them and to make images, but beyond that, I believe that as photographers, we have sort of a special duty to the parks to take care of them and to make sure that we're behaving in a way that sets an example for other parks visitors of how to behave while everyone is in the parks. So, broadly speaking, I consider the national parks like my prized possession. I feel a great sense of ownership. So it's one of the things I love about the parks. That's one of the reasons that sort of phrase about it being America's best idea is so true, is that as citizens, we're the owners of the parks at a personal level. That's how I feel personally. But like any sort of great inheritance that we receive from our ancestors, you want to take care of that. If I've got, right here, I've got this camera that was my grandfather's camera. And so, of course, because I can't go get another one like this, I want to take care of things like that. And, it has such meaning to me, and I want to make sure that it lasts as long as possible. And this is even more true, obviously, with the parks, that the parks have this dual mission of access and preservation. And as visitors to the parks and as owners of the parks, we want to use them, we want to enjoy them, we want to make sure that they're shared with all the other people from the U.S. and from abroad who want to come and see the parks. But we also want to make sure that we're keeping them preserved so that future generations can have the same experiences that we're fortunate to have because people before us did their best to take care of the parks. And so that's true for everyone. But as I said earlier, I think that's even more important for photographers to keep in mind. Photographers, I think, in many ways are sort of the park's power users. We're getting up early, we're staying out late, we're pushing ourselves to try to get to different viewpoints and find different angles, different ways to see the park so that we can, make art that speaks to us of our experience there and is unique. And so that in itself is a very good thing, because in making the photographs of the parks and in sharing those, we're helping to follow in that long tradition of artists who support and promote the parks. The danger is it's really easy to get so caught up that you start breaking the rules, that you start doing damage to landscape or the historic artifacts that you're trying to promote. So I think it's just really important when you see these stories of people not being mindful of preserving the park sort of in the big way, to reassess how it is that you're behaving yourself. Are you, trampling on something that, isn't easily going to grow back, or even if it does easily grow back, that is going to, when the next visitor comes along, they're going to see, this trampled area of grasses or whatever that is unsightly. Are you getting in other people's way, when you're taking photographs? All these things that, yes, you want to have the best photography, do the best photography, you want to have the best experience, but, are we being mindful to make sure that in doing that, we're not lessening the experience for other people? So, some examples of that, if you go up to Mesa Arch at Canyonlands National Park for dawn, this is one of the famous dawn sites in the national parks. There will most assuredly be a line. If it's a nice day, there will be a line of photographers there waiting to take photographs of the dawn as the light bounces off the cliffs and lights the underside of the arch up in this beautiful red color. And so if you start reading on the internet and stuff about photographers' experiences about this, you'll come across stories where, photographers, I don't know if I've seen anyone where they're literally getting in a fist fight, but where people get angry with one another and people start yelling at one another and being very disrespectful to other people, all trying to accomplish the same thing of making a beautiful photograph. And that just, that's really terrible. Yeah, you want to get a photograph, but, let's be a little bit mindful of the other people who have every bit as much right to making a photograph there as we do. And that's a two-way street. So one, you don't want to be the person who just starts walking into other people's shot, right? So someone's set up, they kind of own, for lack of a better term, their space there. Don't just go stand in front of them because you want to get a closer shot or whatever. At the same time, if you're set up and you are taking a shot and someone respectfully says, "Oh, can I step forward for, 5 seconds to snap a shot here?" Don't get angry with them because, you have to delay your shot for 5 seconds. Share and share alike, right? So, and that's how I try to behave. And I've had good experiences if you just, communicate with the people around you and let them know, if you're going to be stepping forward in an area that you think might be in their shot, excuse me, is it okay if, I step here? It's going to take me 30 seconds because I want to get this angle and I want to make sure I'm not ruining your shot. And hopefully they will return your respect and say, yes, that's fine. Thank you for asking. And then you go do it and you follow through on what it was you said you were going to do, and then you get back out of their shot. And hopefully if someone asks you that same thing, you'll behave and return that respect. I try to return that respect to them so that you can all, get the series of shots that you're looking to get at a specific site. In the event that you ask someone, is it okay if I step forward, and they say no, I would not fight them on that. It would be too bad, and I would kind of grumble well, geez, what difference does it make to them? But it's not worth the fight. There's probably other people around. You don't want to create a bad atmosphere, anything like that. Beyond that, there are people who will be there just to see it, and they're not photographers, and you need to be just as respectful of them and their line of sight view. Their reason for being there is every bit as legitimate as a photographer's. And so, just keeping in mind, the experience of the people around you, I think, is really important. There's also the ecological point of view where, if there are areas that are sensitive in any way, you don't want to go damaging things because that viewpoint up there is going to be really great if I just go off trail and climb up these rocks. It's going to make for a better view. Some parks you can do that. If it's not if you're not going to trample anything, and if it's not a danger to yourself or to the ecosystem, um, that might be okay. But there's some places, Arches comes to mind, where I think cryptobiotic crust is what it's called, and so they're really sensitive there to people going off trail, because you can do really damage to the living organisms in the crust that forms the foundation of the ecosystem there. And so, being aware of what the situation is in a park you're in, ecologically and biologically, so that as you're moving about, that you are maintaining the ecosystem there, it's also a really important thing to be aware of as you're visiting places. And then the wildlife. Kind of the rule of thumb is, if the wildlife is reacting to you, you're too close. And so there's places where you can, get really close views of wildlife. You can get really good views of wildlife, but you need to know before you go somewhere what the sort of appropriate distance from a certain animal is, and some idea of what normal behavior for that animal is. And I mean, look, if you're on a trail, at some point you might come across a deer or a sheep or something like this. Without trying, you're close to them and they run away. And I'm not saying you should beat yourself up over that, but to the degree it's possible, I remember being at Yellowstone in an area where a herd of bison was grazing and kind of near the road between one of the rivers and the road. And people were getting so close. I mean, these bison are massive animals. You don't want to have a confrontation with a bison. You really don't. And people were getting so close, and you could tell the alpha male, who in a herd of bison is the first person or first animal that you should be paying attention to. The alpha male was starting to change its behavior. It started to seem agitated, and because of this proximity to people and kind of being in this close-in situation, I mean, that is the time to back off. I mean, yeah, it's great to be close to it and to try to get a great shot, but when you start seeing, life is hard for animals in the wild, and when they start having to expend energy because people are getting too close and people are interfering with sort of naturally what they want to do, then it's time as a visitor and as a photographer to back off. And I do think that as photographers, people, if you're being smart and you're being a good example, not everyone's going to start doing smart things, but people will take note of, what it is you're doing. Or maybe even more to the point, if you're doing stupid things, if you're doing the wrong things, people will start following through, and they'll say, oh, it must be safe because this person looks like they know what they're doing and they're, this close to the bison. And so, instead of failing to prevent a bad situation, you might create a bad situation for people. And so I do think as sort of photographers in many ways are the communicators about the national parks. And there's lots of people writing and doing great things. So obviously it's not solely a photographer's role. But, that's what we do. We're taking images so we can go and tell the stories of how great these places are. And I think that is an awesome thing to do, and it's an important thing to do, but it's a special responsibility. So, know what the situation you're in is going to be like in terms of what's the biology of the place, or if it's a historic site, what is the sensitivity of the historic artifacts or the monuments in a place you're going to, and have a really pretty good understanding before you go there of what the needs of that particular site is, so that you can be respectful of those. Know if there's animals. Again, know what the patterns, the right distances, what is a respectful way to approach photography of the wildlife in a given park. And then, just that respect for other people's experience. And by other people, I mean, today, tomorrow, and 100 years from now. What is the respectful way to leave no trace so that other visitors can have the same sort of pristine experience in the parks that you're able to have and that you're able to photograph. And then finally, I'm just going to wrap up with an even more broad thought. and that's, how we treat the environment every day. The parks don't live in isolation. The parks are sort of bellwethers of how the ecology, how the environment in our country and in the world is doing. And so, I'm not going to sit here and turn this into, a huge environmental lecture or anything like that, but it does. Global warming is affecting the parks. It just is. I proposed to my wife overlooking Grinnell Lake, which, if you haven't been, is this beautiful turquoise lake from the glacial sediment that runs off from Grinnell Glacier. I really wonder how long that's going to be there, because the glaciers are going away. And that's just one very small effect, personal to me. But, in all the parks, the global warming is causing change to the national parks and into the ecology in these places. Pollution, mining, all these things. And yeah, right. So there's an economy. Like, we can't, it's foolish to think that we're going to just shut down all mining or anything like that. But there are causes that, certain projects, certain things that pose, a direct danger to the national parks. How we manage tourism in the parks is very important to make sure that it's done in a sustainable way. So there's this whole broad suite of issues to do with the overlap of the parks and of the environment and the economy. And I think it pays to pay attention to that. The National Parks Conservation Association puts out great materials so that you can stay up to date on, specific issues that affect the parks. And I think having this broad view is also a really important point of towards maintaining the parks so that future generations can enjoy them the way we can. So that's it for today. I hope this was interesting to you. Feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you liked it, subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content about the national parks, about photography, and about photography in the national parks. Thanks for watching this. Please, be respectful of the national parks, maintain them like they are the prized possession that they are, that you want your descendants to, and future generations to inherit and be able to enjoy the same way we do. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye.